Greetings, and welcome back to the channel, Humanity, Facts and Mysteries. Modern society often sees itself as something radically new. We talk about progress, innovation, and a clean break from the past. Technology changes so quickly, political systems evolve, and our daily lives can feel completely disconnected from anything ancient. But what if I told you that beneath this shiny surface of novelty, there's a much deeper continuity? Many of the structures that shape how we live today are not modern inventions at all. They are ancient patterns, refined and disguised by time, but still quietly at work, shaping our every move. One of the most persistent of these patterns is hierarchy. Long before modern states, ancient societies organized themselves through layers of authority. Think about it. Family roles, the status of elders, priesthoods, warrior classes, and administrative elites all created predictable chains of command. These hierarchies weren't always rigid, but they established clear expectations about obedience, responsibility, and who was in charge. Fast forward to today. Modern institutions often present themselves as rational and merit-based, yet they still lean on inherited forms of rank, credentialing, and symbolic authority that echo those ancient social orders. The job titles, the corner offices, the layers of management hits, all a modern version of an age-old system. Another enduring pattern is ritualized behavior. In ancient societies, rituals structured daily life. They signaled who belonged to the group, reinforced social norms, and stabilized entire communities. Today, a lot of these rituals have survived, just in secular form. Think about bureaucratic procedures, formal greetings, the ceremonies we have for promotions, legal protocols, and even the routines we follow at work. They all function as modern rituals. We rarely question them because they just feel natural, but their purpose is exactly the same as it was thousands of years ago: to create order through repetition. Economic exchange follows a similar logic. Ancient trade networks depended on trust, reputation, and reciprocity long before formal contracts were ever a thing. Merchants relied on shared customs, moral expectations, and long-term relationships to do business. Modern markets might appear to be governed by abstract systems, but trust is still absolutely fundamental. Brands have replaced personal reputations. Financial institutions have replaced personal guarantees. The underlying pattern, the need for trust, persists. Power is another area where this ancient logic is still very visible. Ancient rulers maintained their control not just through force but through narrative. They used myths, symbols, and epic origin stories to justify their authority and shape what the public believed. Modern power operates in much the same way. National histories, corporate brand identities, political messaging, and media narratives all frame our reality and legitimize who gets to make the decisions. The tools have changed from stone tablets to social media, but the pattern of influencing people through stories remains exactly the same. Even conflict follows ancient templates. Societies have always defined themselves by creating an opposition. It's always us versus them, order versus chaos, civilization versus barbarism. These simple binaries helped to simplify complex realities and mobilize entire populations. Today you see similar frameworks dominating our political and cultural conversations. The language might have softened a bit, but the fundamental structure of creating an other endures. These patterns are so hard to see precisely because they are so familiar to us. They don't feel like they've been imposed on us, they feel inevitable. Ancient societies didn't just invent these patterns randomly. They were developed through endless trial and error, adaptation, and sheer survival. The systems that worked persisted. Those that failed simply disappeared. Modern society inherited the survivors. Over time, their ancient origins were forgotten, but their influence remained, hidden in plain sight. Now, recognizing this continuity doesn't mean we should reject progress. It just means understanding that innovation often builds on these ancient foundations rather than replacing them entirely. The past doesn't control us through memory alone. It controls us through the very structure of our world. So what makes these ancient patterns so powerful? It's not their visibility, but their incredible ability to adapt. They survive by changing their appearance while preserving their core function. Hierarchy no longer announces itself with divine kings or sacred bloodlines. Instead, it operates through credentials, job titles, algorithms, and levels of access. Ritual no longer requires temples or sacrifices, but it still demands our participation through procedures, deadlines, and symbolic gestures that signal our loyalty and belonging. People follow these patterns not because they consciously choose to, but because deviating from them feels risky, strange, or socially costly. This is how ancient structures maintain their relevance in a modern environment. They no longer rely on belief. They rely on normalization. Another powerful pattern is centralization during a crisis. In the ancient world, periods of instability almost always led to a concentration of power. An emergency was used to justify control. Chaos was used to legitimize authority. And once stability returned, those centralized structures rarely disappeared completely. Modern societies follow the exact same logic. Crises have a way of accelerating control mechanisms that were previously resisted by the public. Temporary measures have a funny way of becoming permanent frameworks. The pattern repeats itself because it worked before. Ancient societies also understood the power of abstraction. Concepts like law, order, debt, and obligation were removed from personal relationships and transformed into impersonal systems. This is what allowed large populations to function without everyone having to constantly negotiate everything. Modern systems have perfected this kind of abstraction, but the underlying idea is ancient. When responsibility is transferred from an individual to a system, people feel less accountable, and compliance goes up. This isn't an accident. It's a survival strategy that's been refined over millennia. Even our ideas of success and failure follow these inherited templates. Ancient societies defined a person's worth through their contribution to the stability of the group. Modern societies frame it through productivity, status, and recognition. The language has changed, but the pressure to measure up remains the same. Individuals are still measured against expectations that often serve the collective order more than their own personal fulfillment. These patterns persist because they solve recurring problems. How do you coordinate large groups of people? How do you maintain predictability? How do you distribute resources? How do you legitimize authority? Modern society hasn't escaped these questions. It has simply found new ways to answer them using old, time-tested logic. This deep continuity explains why attempts to radically redesign society from the ground up often struggle. New systems must still deal with these ancient constraints. When they ignore them, instability usually follows. When they acknowledge them, they succeed by adapting the inherited patterns rather than trying to abolish them completely. Understanding this doesn't mean we should just resign ourselves to fate. It gives us awareness. Once these patterns are recognized, they can be questioned, they can be adjusted, or they can even be resisted. But ignoring them doesn't take away their influence. The ancient world still controls modern society, not through tradition or nostalgia, but through the very structures that proved effective long before we gave them modern names. These patterns aren't conspiracies. They are survivors. They endured because they worked. And as long as human societies face the same fundamental challenges, these ancient patterns will continue to shape how we live, how we govern, and how we understand ourselves. So which ancient patterns do you recognize in your modern life? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Stay with humanity, facts and mysteries, because the past does not rule us openly, it shapes the systems we rarely stop to question. Thanks for watching.